are now listening to Talking Transparency, the podcast where transparents talk transparently, hosted by Thea Ross, Melissa Luxon, and Cody Connor.
Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm Cody.
I'm Thea. On today's episode, we are talking transparently with Dee Sube. She is the chairperson of the Transgender Assistant Program at Virginia, aka TAP, and the godmother of the leaders of the trans community in Hampton Roads. She is here with her dear friends, Tracey Swinarsky, to talk about the Trans Day of Visibility. We'll be getting their thoughts on that, but first let's see what's coming up in the community.
Thank you, Thea. And as usual, we got a whole slate of things coming up. March 17th is the next trans family dinner, and it's going to be right on St. Patrick's Day, so...
Corned beef and cabbage.
Yeah, corned beef and cabbage.
But I have the green cream soda, right? That sounds a little bit gross. Anyways, I think it'll be delicious.
I think it'll be a lot of fun.
Yes.
Of course, on the 23rd, we have our next D&D group. March 29th is the Trans Day of Visibility event in Norfolk at the Southeastern Transgender Resource Center. It's going to run from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m., and then there's going to be like a mini ball afterwards.
Yes, the STRC is hosting a ball, a Trans Day of Visibility ball. It's going to be awesome.
And then on April 21st is, of course, our April Trans Family Dinner. The 25th is our Know Your Rights workshop at the CRC,
yes,
Creative Reuse Center. And then the 27th is, of course, April D&D Club. And then FemFest is March 26th as well.
Yes, and there's another thing that we've got going on here that's actually not in our script, which is our our financial literacy workshop that's going to be at the Creative Reuse Center on March 28th. It's going to be hosted by Mel Howard from the Thriving Trans Men of Color. So if you could come out to that, it'd be amazing. You can get tickets online. You can find, if you go to our Facebook, there's plenty of things like that. It's a free event, but please sign up because we've got tons of interest and we get your seat before they're gone.
I'm glad we caught that one.
I know, me too.
And then Outwork 757. On March 21st, noon to 3 p.m.?
Yes, absolutely. Outwork 757 is an amazing expo that they do every single year. So March is super busy. It's almost like June this year.
There's a lot going on. Going into summer, too. Where it's exciting. It's a lot to do.
Well, thank you, Cody. And thank you, Dee and Tracey, for being here. Please introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about yourselves.
My name is Tracey Swinarsky. I transitioned 20 years ago. Was really been active in the trans community. Used to do a lot of talking for Equality Virginia. I was on their transgender awareness support speakers bureau. So I used to go around and speak through this area and on the peninsula too about basically telling my story and people to ask questions too. So very interesting that I talk about Equality Virginia. That's about it.
I love Equality Virginia. They're really a great organization. I know they've swatted down all the bills this year. Really, really fantastic. And also we have Miss Dee here.
My name is Dee Sube, and I'm the chairperson of the Transgender Assistance Program of Virginia. I transitioned, 30 years ago. And it was a gradual transition. It didn't happen overnight. I don't think it does for anyone. However, it was back in the dark ages, even before the internet. So there weren't very many resources available. I've conducted facilitated support groups. I opened the LGBT Center in Norfolk as their first employee. After 3 or 4 years of planning that, we finally got funding through the Elton John AIDS Foundation. And in 2015, we started the Transgender Assistance Program of Virginia. And it's just grown organically over the last 9 years.
That's amazing. I know the Transgender Assistance Program is pretty much the standard between the STRC and TAP when it comes to Hampton Roads. Y'all are the ones to call. Y'all are the people to reach out to. And we're so grateful that you have done this work for the past decades and decades for our generation and for future trans folks to even be able to be here. So I thank you again for being here and telling a little bit about your story. And I hope that we can get into some of those things as much as you want, as little as you want. But also, I just wanted to say thank you to begin. And I know that there's a lot of things, and giving us your time this evening is awesome. So, Cody, what have we got on the agenda aside from our events? Sorry.
I mean, what do we have on the agenda besides the events that we have coming up?
Yes.
We need more than the events.
No, we don't. So I was curious, what prompted you to start TAP Virginia? What exactly got you there to start TAP?
Well, like I said in the beginning, and when I transitioned, there were no resources. I felt all alone. And there was just nothing. I was born in 1951. I'm 74. I'll be 73 years old. I almost added a year to my age. But there's just no information. There's just nothing. No support groups, no literature. I finally found a magazine. It's called Tapestry, I believe, and I found that at at that point it was called a gay bookstore, and that gave me some information. However, my eyes opened when I was able to get online, the advent of the internet, and I found AOL chat rooms, and they had a couple transgender chat rooms, and I finally was able to speak to people that had experienced the same thing that I had throughout my life. Mm-hmm. And I was, the term transgender only came into common use, I want to say, in the 80s and going into the 90s. So I was able to meet some other trans people. I met a bunch of trans people while I worked in Great Britain, but there weren't many resources there either. So I decided, I made a promise to myself that if I ever could do anything to help other people, other trans people, I would do that. And here I am today. I mean, with the support groups for so long, and Transgender Assistance Program of Virginia, came into being when a group of us, a group of activists got together after one of the support group meetings, as a matter of fact, and they said, we want to start an organization. And I said, okay, you want to start an organization? What do you want to do with this organization? And they said, well, we wanted either to do activism or advocacy for the trans community. And I said, I understand that, but we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We have a statewide organization in Equality, Virginia, that does advocacy and lobbying at a state level. So we went down, looked at a few different topics like homelessness, and then we did settle on people that are housing insecure, trans people, trans adults that are housing insecure or homeless within the entire state. And we figured, well, let's try and we'll try that. And in the last 9 years, we've had 2,000, about 2,000, a little over 2,000 instances of where we've assisted people throughout the state of Virginia. And it's not just here in Hampton Roads, it's in Richmond, it's in Roanoke. We've helped people in Northern Virginia throughout the state, Harrisonburg and Charlottesville, and, out in the boonies in southwestern Virginia, way down there in Bristol, all the way up to Front Royal, up and down the Blue Ridge Mountains, and where there are absolutely zero resources. And we've been able to dig out resources around the state, so we can refer people to other resources if we're not able to help financially. And here we are today, and never expected it to be like this. And when we started the organization, and Thea, you and I were kind of kidding earlier about me being the executive director, and I think that was in your script to start with. We chose in the beginning not to have a president or an executive director or any type of leader like that. They asked me if I would chair the meetings.
Okay. So you're the chairperson.
I am the chairperson. That's all I am.
Okay.
We try to agree on everything by consensus. And if we disagree, we will work on it until we can agree to disagree. And I'm talking about the board. And we try to do everything as transparent as possible so that we're able to help people without any, what do I want to say, without any questions asked.
That's
If
important.
that makes sense. If that makes sense. So that's where we are with TAP Virginia.
I mean, you've both been in the community here for, I mean, since I was, very much younger than I am now. What have you? How have you seen things change, positively and negatively through, as you guys have gone through your journey? Because you came from a spot where, like you said, it was like the dark ages. And now we, definitely have a lot more information. The internet's helped a lot of people connect and learn. But also now, we're also experiencing a lot of, just hate, if you will, loud in a lot of places right now. And so just from your perspective, how have you seen that change? How have you experienced that? Just share that with us a little bit.
Well, when I transitioned 20 years ago, it was a long process for me too. I knew something was different, like I should have been a girl, and I was like, whatever my first memory was. I remember, like, when I was a teenager, I used to go to our local newsstand store and everything, and I found a thing called Penthouse Forum. And they said it was Penthouse without the pictures.
For everybody that says they like the stories.
Yeah. And it was a lot of people would write in there, and I always would go there, and I was a World War II fanatic, so I'd take a World War II magazine, have the Penthouse Forum, hiding it, and I'd be reading, and I found out stuff about, then they said transvestites were writing in all these questions and stuff, and then I just was like, well, now I know kind of what I am here, then it was called a transsexual, so I know that's the case. There wasn't a lot of information. I grew up in northern Jersey, so maybe there might have been a little bit more. There was Dr. Pio that was in just above the line in New York. And he used to be on all these talk shows back then about transsexual people. I'm like, let me make an appointment with him. And then I backed out at the last second. So, the biggest thing, right now, there's just so much more information out there for people to find if they want to. On the other part, there's a lot more information, and some of it might not be the correct information too. So you have that with the internet. You have those two things. It used to be, I think, I used to know most of the trans people here. Now I have no idea who the people are. It's just, there's a lot more of us out there, and we've come out and we're presenting ourselves, and that's one of the big changes with the community that has grown so much since that time, since 20 years ago when I transitioned here.
Well, people like you opened the door for other people to come out safely and have words to express who they were. So, you're a big part of that community, being able to, grow or even just be seen more.
That's the key, is visibility. And that's why the Transgender Day of Visibility is so important, but it's not just one day a year, it's 365 days a year. Mm-hmm. So with all the events you were mentioning that are going on in the area, we had our volunteer meeting last night, and there's 20-some events that we're going to be at, and the reason we're at those events is to be visible. There's a statistic out there that there's only 1 in 10 people will say that they've ever met a trans person. Well, they may have met a trans person and didn't realize it, for one thing. But we want to be able to be out there and present, just like all trans organizations. Pretty much all trans organizations want to be out there to be visible, so people understand that we're human.
Yeah, the visibility and exposure, that's important. That's how we learn from each other and begin to understand each other. Because a lot of times that's the biggest roadblock, right? Is understanding each other and being able to see each other. And that's the best way I have found to do that with anybody, is to spend time and get to know them, and that's
exactly how things have changed.
Yep.
Because like Tracy said, back when we were coming along, and we met became roommates like in 2004,
20 years ago.
20 years ago.
Yeah.
And we met at a support group, at a trans support group. It's the only one in the area at that time. And and then when Tracey came out, she moved in, and we became roommates, and she had her room, I had my room, and we did our own thing, and to this day we're still together. So we've seen a lot of these changes come about. And I think that there were probably as many people back then that identified as transgender, but they were afraid to come out.
Yeah, same percentage of people, but just more scared, more unsafe.
And so, and history is cyclical. It always has been. I mean, and that's just a fact. And so the hate that we're seeing today, and we see a lot of it today.
But it's not new.
It's not new at all. It's not new at all. We just happen to have gone through a period of in Virginia, we'll talk about Virginia, is we had a progressive governor in Ralph Northam. I'll use names, why not? And now we have a very conservative governor.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be nice. I'll try to be nice.
Yeah, I was thinking other words too.
Yeah. Well, I call him Trumpkin.
Yeah, Governor Trumpkin.
So it's cyclical. And even before Northam, we had a conservative, or a couple governors before that. It was very conservative. So in Virginia, as the country goes, it's up and down. And so I have hope. I have great hope that over the next 10 years we'll recycle and be able to take 2 steps forward again. It's take 2 steps forward and then we take 1 back.
Yeah, because it always kind of goes in a wave. It's oscillating, but we want that oscillation to be on an upward trend.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think we're fortunate here because Equality Virginia a few years ago really worked hard at getting the Virginia Values Act passed, which gives protection in the state, for the LGBT population, which most states in the South don't have that. We were the first Southern state to actually pass something like that. That's now a law. And other states in the South had that, and they really worked hard. So, that's one difference from Virginia compared to some other states, that we do have that law that protects us.
And it also speaks to visibility, because when we think about what's different about Virginia is that we've had this amazing representative in Danica Rome, who just became a senator. And I think that sometimes us being in the room, I think having the backup, having the organization, having people on the ground is vital. That's how you succeed. But I think also being able to have us in the discussion at the table, I think that makes a difference, or at least people that understand our needs.
Back when Equality Virginia was working hard at lobbying the General Assembly to pass the Virginia Values Act, was the name of the act. Mm-hmm. The Transgender Assistance Program and several other organizations around the state worked real hard at phone banks, door-to-door canvassing, just to get our representatives in Richmond to pass the Virginia Values Act. And when it was passed, we were the 21st state in the country to have it here in Virginia. And what is the Virginia Values Act? It bans discrimination in housing, employment, public accommodation, and credit. On gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation.
Yeah, it's actually I'm in housing. I'm a maintenance supervisor, and so being that I have to learn yearly. I have to renew my fair housing training, and it's actually a part of fair housing training in Virginia.
But it's amazing, even with that law, we're still facing discrimination in housing, because people that are homeless
mm-hmm.
or are housing insecure, don't have any money. How are they going to turn around and sue or hire an attorney to prove they were discriminated against in housing?
Yeah,
it's a conundrum. We run into it every day.
Well, it's predatory. They know that they have a loophole and they're in power, and that cycle exists for underserved communities, especially the trans community, and it gets very much perpetuated in a lot of places. That's part of the reason why I was at the city council meeting last night, speaking against a proposed tax decrease. It's a real estate tax decrease. And it doesn't really do anything for the average homeowner. It gives them like maybe $80 a year. But in the meantime, you have talks of budget cuts in schools, especially. A lot of people are very worked up about, justifiably so, them talking about cutting budgets in schools to take away music programs, art programs, which is especially sensitive to the community because that's very much represents some of the safer spaces for our LGBTQ children in our schools. But not just that, when you're talking about these services getting cut, not just in schools, but also, in public services in the city, because it's stuff like that affects their budget. It vastly disproportionately has a negative impact on those that are already struggling. Because nobody who doesn't own land is getting any benefit from a real estate tax. The people that are most likely to get a negative impact from losing services are those underserved and underrepresented and already struggling communities. And so you have lawmakers doing these things that even though they can say it's not about that, it's still directly impacting those communities negatively the most over and over.
And correct me if I'm wrong, didn't the school board find a way to raise their pay?
Oh, they raised pays for teachers, and at the end of the day,
not just for teachers, but for themselves.
They raised the pay for the school board, and
amazing.
And, there's way more than there. We built schools for 80,000 students. We only have 65,000.
Oh wow.
They've been systematically poking holes in the music and arts program while bolstering the sports program. So that eventually it could reach this critical mass and not be sustainable anymore. And so it's more than just, it's always a little bit more than what they say it is. And that's part of the struggle, especially with some of the middle line people. The people that are willing to, I just want to let them explore doing this terrible thing, because maybe it's not terrible. Maybe this will be the one time that it doesn't go horribly wrong for
You see, and the mistake they make is not believing that there are malicious actors, that there are people concerted that want public schools to be gone. They want them to be small, teeny, tiny, weak, if they even exist at all. And when you don't acknowledge that as the opponent, then you somehow create this space in the middle. You say, oh, no, well, these people are reasonable. These people want to do, but these people also want to cut basic funding. I mean, we don't have programs, and they're talking about cutting things for foreign language within these cuts as well, for like different German classes and things, and like raising the standards for the number of students who want to do elective courses. So I know when I was in school wanting to do like comparative government or things, we had to get a certain number of students to even be able to sign up for it. They're trying to make that even more difficult because, and that's the sort of thing that is only going to lead to a smaller curriculum and a more isolated curriculum, even though we have so many students. Well, and we have a diverse need.
That's the huge, that's the idea, right? And you're seeing this in school boards across the country. We have somebody in our school board right now, and Victoria Manning. I'll say her name because I don't like her. She knows it. She probably doesn't like me very much either. She's probably real tired of seeing my face up there. But she's even got like a blog or a book behind the iron wall of government schools, because that's how she views the schools. She is there specifically to tear down the public school system because there's this giant push for privatized schools, right? School choice. And so the more you make the public school system unable to meet students' needs, the more resources you take away from them, the closer we get to people going, yes, we want the private school thing. And that's because a lot of people don't take the time to educate themselves and understand that private schools can do whatever curriculum they want. And more than 80% of them are religiously affiliated. And so what happens when public schools actually do get basically terrible or shut down. The only kids in them are the ones coming from poverty, coming from underserved communities. We've resegregated schools by class and race and everything else, because you can't just go to take a private school voucher and go say, hey, I got a voucher, let my kid in. They're a private school. They can say no matter how much money you wave at them. And they're not going to give your kid transportation. You're not going to get lunches. And so the only people that will be able to afford private school are going to be the people that really didn't need that much help to get in to begin with. And it's just going to make public schools filled with struggling kids without resources.
Public education is so vital.
Sorry, I'm very passionate about our future.
I don't see where we go, but
the problem is called dumbing down America.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if the populace, if our population is not well educated, they're going to continue to believe in disinformation from the politicians and believe in all the lies they're being told, and become even if people don't understand how to do critical thinking, then they become sheep.
Yeah, nobody's easier to control than a scared, uneducated person.
Fear is powerful. If you can get someone afraid, especially if they don't know what to do with that fear, if they haven't been educated on how to act and react, because both of those are important, it's amazing. That's why even when I was, coaching policy debate and teaching policy debate in the schools, one of the things that we wanted to do with the school board is advocate, say, we need to have critical thinking, logic, rhetoric, debates, these actual things that are part of the history and legacy of Western education. You can go all the way back to Socrates. You can go all the way to how do we learn about things? How do we expose ideas? Except to read them in the room, have them be tore apart, and then respond with that and contend with those ideas. And I think that that's something that other states, Texas, Illinois, Alaska, different ones have that as a part of their state curriculum. And, here in Virginia, we don't. It's something I've always lamented. But here we're barely even able to keep music education in schools with the way these folks are. And it's funny because, exactly what you said is right, Misty. It's about having an educated populace. And you'll hear this from a lot of conservative thinkers. They'll bemoan the idea, the schools are getting worse and everything.
Oh, those intellectuals.
But it's like they don't want the history of black and brown folks. They don't want the history of queer folks. They don't want the history of poor folks. They don't want the history of America, well, the majority of us. So I don't know.
Well, when you control people's information, you control their emotions, right? Because let's be real. As a person, you're not in control of what you feel. What you feel kind of happens. What controls what you feel, if there's anything that controls that, is your information, right? And I mean, that's very easy to see. If somebody told you that I was this terrible person, that I'd done something, that I'd stolen something, all right, you'd feel a certain way about me, right, based on your information. Now, you then later learned that they were mistaken, that was somebody else. You get to know me as me, then you feel a very different way about me because your information has changed. And so that's very much a part of not even just controlling how people are thinking, but impacting how people are feeling by making sure that they're getting the wrong information, and that information gives them the wrong emotions. And that's not just about, we think this is bad. Now you have people with all of this emotional attachment to the very wrong information. And that becomes incredibly dangerous. That's what we're seeing a lot.
Well, just think about January 6th.
Right?
Look at all the disinformation and how much hatred was in that mob that marched on Trump's orders and stormed the Capitol, all based on emotion and disinformation.
Mm-hmm.
And these people actually believe in that garbage.
Yes.
Yeah.
They actually believe in that garbage. I mean, DeSantis is down there in Florida saying slavery was okay. Slaves actually got paid. Did you know that? Slaves got paid. It was
they got some good skills for
Yeah.
taking out into the world. Yeah. I mean, it's some of the places their minds are able to go to justify the way that they feel about things is just
But the thing that riles me the most is that people don't vote. Our own people don't vote. And if we want to see real change, and the changes y'all are talking about, which I agree with in education and just in life in general, people have to be able to think. They have to be able to make their own decisions based on the best information out there, and then vote.
Yeah.
I don't care which party they vote for, honestly. I just want people to vote.
I do. I care, but honestly, I do want them to vote. Period. It'd be great if they're involved. So you're right, but I care a little bit these
Well, I
days.
do
Yeah,
care,
yeah.
These days, especially. but
I did that for the podcast.
You're wonderful,
These
Misty.
days
I swear.
you care a little bit, but there is something to be said for there being a lot of people out there that don't really have that hate, but would still consider, just like there's a lot of Christians that we know are.
But see, they're riled up, and I can understand why people get riled up sometimes, because what they use is this image of children being harmed, of children, because that's a very visceral and human and powerful thing. And historically, this has been used to bash the queer community openly for hundreds and hundreds of years, all sorts of examples. But it also goes to speak to bashing any minority. And that's when you should pay attention, when someone's like, for the children, that they're either trying to sell you something or they're trying to scare you into something. And we should care about the children. I'm not saying we shouldn't. We should always pay attention to those things. But what scares me, and what I think scares them, is the idea that, oh, children are being harmed, or that these that are being exposed to bad ideas, and that type of stuff tosses logic out the window for a lot of people. Now they're riled up. Now they're looking for a reason, and that brings me to my next question, which is, we have children too. We have families. We have people. We have children that from cis parents who have trans kids. We have trans parents with cis kids. We have all sorts of different types of trans families. And that's what we work to try to actually put forward and let them know that when we talk about wholesomeness, when we talk about doing good in the community, you talk about families, you talk about futures, talk about our families too, because they're important. And that, to me, this is a question we ask all the time, but I want to ask especially is what does a trans family mean to y'all? What exactly does that term or that idea mean for you personally as a trans person?
For me, it means community. It means our community. It means all the people you mentioned. And I think about all the volunteers with TAP Virginia. No one gets paid in our organization financially. None of us. We're all volunteers, and we do it because of our passion, and the passion for our family of choice. Because in many cases, your family of birth has many people have been rejected by their family of birth, and so our family of choice. I mean, I doubt that Tracy and I would have become such close friends
If my ex didn't kick me out of the house. That's how we became close friends. My ex was like, no, you have to leave. And then Dee was like, well, I'm gone for 6 months out of the year because I do this liquidation. So it'd be great to have somebody sticking around. Like, okay. So, yes, we became roommates, and it just went from there. And that was part of her idea of always helping people and trans people. But, she saw somebody in need, which was me, and she was like, no, I have a place that you can stay. And who knew 20 years later we'd still be roommates?
Well, and that's what community is all about. It's the work that you do with Calos Coalition, with trans family dinners and et cetera, is pulling together the community. It's, what we do at our meetings, when we go to events. It's interesting when we go to events that at our table we'll have maybe 10 or 15 volunteers around that table, and you look down at other tables and they're lucky to have 1 or 2 volunteers. And I'm talking about cisgender organizations basically that are lucky to get any volunteers there. But our family just comes together, right? Like,
It's true.
Yeah.
And think about how our family comes together with planning T-Dove.
Yes, that's been amazing.
That we have, how many people are at those meetings? 10 or 12 people come to T-Dove planning meetings.
I think one of them we had 20 people, Misty. I close at least.
And I mean, we're all different individuals. We all have different agendas in our organizations. We all do different stuff with our organizations. However, we can agree because of our common bond of being trans and understanding that you've gone through very similar things that I've gone through, although they're different, right?
Of course. No two trans people have the same story. That's always I would go to that. But sorry.
But similar.
Exactly.
They're similar.
Find any two people with the same story, and you've won the lottery.
We just have,
that's true.
yeah, just trans people. There's something similar between a lot of our stories. I mean,
It's true.
there's a common thread that you'll always find with trans people. You know, I was scared of coming out. Oh, finally got the courage to come out. Now, what do I do after then? And possibly losing family or losing a job. I mean, there's a lot of common things that we go through, but it's a different experience for all of us because we're all different individuals.
Exactly.
But you pull all of that together, and we're able to pull off this event, and we can walk out of those meetings and you know, again, agree to disagree. Again, we do that, and sometimes it gets heated, but we're still family, and that happens in families. Heated things happen in families, but then you come back together again and say, we need to work together, because the more of us that work together, the stronger we are, right? There's strength in numbers, right? We need all the numbers we can get to win this battle, to keep fighting this battle. That's why at the Transgender Day of Remembrance, in pulling the community together, because I always saw in the history of the community, of the trans community, there's been a dichotomy between white and black. And I've always thought, well, cultural differences in many cases. So in having T-Door and T-Dove, we want to pull the community together, and I'm talking the entire community, so that we can overcome those differences. And then at this last Transgender Day of Remembrance, we had a youth speaker who was at school board meetings.
Yes, Miss
right?
Emily LaBar. She's amazing.
Yeah.
Did an incredible job. Her speech was awesome. I was so happy she was there. And all the speakers did an amazing job. And just a shout out to, and I kind of digress here, but a shout out to Vega.
Of course, Miss Vega. Oh my gosh.
She's my co-grandma.
Okay.
In the trans community. Actually, I met Vega at a support group that she was facilitating 25 years ago.
Wow. I mean, I know it's a pageant group that she's been running since like the late 90s for trans girls and for what. Mm-hmm. I mean, when we talk about history, I want to share this history, and I want to learn this history, and want to make sure that it's never forgotten, because the people that hate us, they want it gone, and to me, it's precious. And then when I find these news stories all the time, we need to have Miss Vega on the podcast. I would love to have her on sometime. But how did y'all meet exactly, you and Vega, all those years in that support group? Tell us.
Vega worked for an organization called the Tidewater AIDS Crisis Task Force,
okay.
TAPT. And they had trans support group meetings once a week, I want to say. Was it once a month or once? I don't remember how often they were, but she was facilitating those groups. And I started to go to that group along with a couple other friends. And it was primarily trans women of color that went to those groups, and I kind of stood out like a sore thumb. But that was fine, and I got to know Vega. And when we started, soon thereafter, we started the Gender Expression Movement support group. We called it something different. We called it New Life Transgender Outreach, I think, at first, because we had the meetings at New Life, and Vega came to those meetings, so we went back and forth to our different meetings. That's how we met, and just became friends from there. And we used to meet up at Nutty Buddies. Have you ever heard of Nutty Buddies Bar?
I've heard stories.
At Ward's Corner, and that was a place for all the trans women to hang out. And a lot of butch lesbians hung out there. Drag shows were fantastic there. Everyone came for the drag shows. We just went to hang out and had a good time. It was a lot of fun. Eventually, it kind of got rough in there, and there were a couple shootings and stabbings, and they eventually shut the place down.
Wow. So, what's it like? Is you feel like there's more? You see more young people in the community now?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. There's so many more, even in my daily dealings with our clients. There are so many young people out there that are housing insecure. They've come out and either have been kicked out of their houses, out of their homes, have no place to go, they're on the street, or they've come out without a plan, or both. Just no plan. So, but there are a lot of people, young people out there that have been very successful, and they're in school, furthering their education, and hopefully will land on their feet when they get out of school. A lot of folks are transitioning at a much younger age than when Tracey and I were coming along.
Yeah.
And I wanted to dive into this because we went up with Equality Virginia recently. We had the privilege and opportunity to lobby, and we got up there. We got a chance to talk to some of the legislators and different folks. And one of the things that it was pushed back on, something that they were actually really incredulous at, was one of the legislative aides. Actually, was this idea that parents were kicking their trans or queer folks out, that surely that would be illegal. Surely it would be. And to me, one of the things that I think is amazing is the fact that we understand that there's 90,000 some odd homeless youth throughout America. And we understand that a certain percentage of that, obviously, both parents have passed, something has happened, or something's fallen through the cracks. But where do we think a large portion of the rest of these children are coming from, and why aren't they feeling safe to go to the police? And these are larger questions that I don't think a lot of these legislators want to have. They don't even want to think about it or see. And
it's something that's been swept under for how long now? I mean, it's that dark underbelly that they don't really want to look at and see, because you do have to hold parents accountable. And that's why you see, like when we were talking with that legislative aide, all of a sudden they were runaways. Mm-hmm. Well, if parents are in control of their child's life before, how come that's the excuse for the child to be homeless? The child made that decision. I think, to me, it's absurd, because I was a homeless kid. I was a homeless teen for a little while. And part of it is that you don't really think to go to the police. I know I never did, for being a homeless teen.
That was the last thing you wanted to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there wasn't like an avenue for being like, hey, my mom kicked me out and I'm just on the street. I just tried to find a safe place to sleep. Tried to find somebody to hang out with so that wasn't just by myself. A friend's couch here, as long as the mom would let me, and maybe a night on a bench. If I was lucky, I'd find like a nice mom that would let me sleep there a couple times a week. And then from there, you just do what you need to do. You find ways to stay awake when you don't feel safe, and a lot of other stuff that goes into that. And that's been happening to our youth for generations now, and nobody's ever wanted to look at that. Part of the reason why it's so important to bring that to the forefront now is because so many of those homeless youth, as I experienced, are the LGBT community. You have a community that represents maybe 10% of the population, but they represent 30% or more of our homeless youth.
And one of the big issues is that in order to survive, many youth turn, homeless youth turn towards drug trade,
Drugs, sex work.
and sex work. And the issue is that once a pimp or a dealer gets a hold of them, they're trafficked in drugs and sex, sometimes together.
And you get into a cycle, because once you start getting in trouble for doing what you have to do, then it becomes harder to do other things to get that money too. Even if you don't end up full on being pimped and trafficked, even just getting busted selling drugs or getting busted hustling, now you start to get a record. Mm-hmm. And now it becomes harder to get a job. Now it becomes harder to get a place to live. Mm-hmm. And so now you are more pushed into doing that same thing that you got in trouble for, and then you get in trouble for it again. And you just end up in that cycle.
So if you go back to Vega's support group at TACT, probably 90% of the people sitting around the table were all on the stroll. That's what it was called.
Ladies of the evening.
Yeah.
Yep. They were on the job. And when Vega would go around the room, and of course Vega in the organization she worked with was very much interested in HIV prevention. That was their mission, was HIV prevention, testing, education. And Vega, I remember one time asked, a general question, well, why do you stay in this? Why do you keep doing this? Why do you keep walking the streets? Why, and why are you on the game? And the overriding answer from the group was, the money is too good. I can make as much in a week as most people can make in a month. And it's too much fun.
Wow.
It is definitely an issue, in trying to deal with a lot of folks who are trying to get in or out of the game. It's very hard, because once you're at a certain lifestyle, once you're at a certain level of existing, and there is no fallback, and there is no support group, and the folks around you know that, the vulnerability, it's scary. It's terrifying. And the stories I've heard, I've been very fortunate in my life, but I know that the stories of my trans sibs and things, when you're in that position, it's I don't know, it's a nightmare.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
Or it can become a nightmare
and
very quickly.
Vegas said, well, then how do you... It's dangerous. How do you protect yourself? And I remember one girl pulling a 9mm out of her handbag that she works with. And Vegas said, well, what happens when you turn 35 or 40 and you age out of the sex trade? What happens then? Or if you die before then, because you're in the most dangerous profession imaginable.
Oh, and that's often, that's often what it takes is some sort of shocking event sometimes. I mean, I know I can trace back one of my biggest motivators for changing some of the things that I was doing in my young life was when somebody I knew murdered somebody. I had a friend that murdered a kid, and it became very tense overall experience, right? Wake up in the morning, your buddy's face is on the news. I ended up having to go testify during the murder trial. And I moved to like another state because I wasn't doing a lot of great things then. And all of a sudden I knew police were going to be wanting to talk to me and all of those different things. And in so many ways, his terrible action saved my life. Because it was that shocking, huge act that made me make a sudden change. And if I hadn't had that shocking experience, I may not have made that same decision. It became not fun right away. Everything I was doing instantly became not fun and not worth it.
We've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we managed to do that quite a bit on our show. We cover a lot of ground. We talk a lot. I know. I'd love to see you guys come out to one of our dinners sometime.
Absolutely, we've got the one on March 17th. I don't know if you like corned beef and corned beef.
Don't know how Irish you are.
Don't know how Irish you are. But y'all are always welcome, and that's what we're trying to do is make more of those spaces as best we can, because I know no matter what happens, no matter whatever happens in the future with politics, how things are going to go or not, that if we're together, that we can get through it. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I wanted to remark on also, and I was thinking to while I was listening to, is that, you know, every single person since I've started doing this work has told me stories about Misty, and have told me about things that you have done to help. Positive stories. Don't freak out. They're wonderful stories. People.
Nothing about the nights at Nutty Buddies.
All fun, wonderful stories. Exactly. But that's the thing is there's so much love, and there is so much effort, and there's so much having been there. And the more that I learn about it, and the more that I receive from that community, the more that I give to that community, it makes me happy to know that there's that trans family there. And one of the things I want these kids, as they're being attacked and then politicized their whole life, whether they're making decisions, whether they're not making decisions, to know is that there's community, there are people like y'all, there are people like me, trans adults who are out here living our lives, thriving, being the best of ourselves, and that there is space for them, despite what a lot of other people don't want them to believe.
They need to know that we have their backs.
Yes.
And it's, I've found so much that it's good for us, for parents, you know, like myself, to really get to experience the community and all the ages of the community, because the more I get to know people like Thea, people like you, Misty, and I mean, the more I also get closer to understanding and having the right information for what my daughter's going through, and how best to support her and see her, and all of those things, because it's not my experience, you know what I mean? And so it's also she's still going through, she's young, she's 13 years old, it's a new experience for her. And so as a father trying to help my child become an adult, getting to meet other adults like her and just other members of the community, it gives me so much more insight and ability to give her the father she should have.
Stop calling me Miss D.
Okay.
Just call me D.
And I was calling you D before, but then she called you Miss D so many times that I was like, man, I don't want to be the one that doesn't call her Miss D.
But I'll call you D.
I'm old, but it makes me feel
Well, when you were saying all you heard was good stories, you want the bad stories?
Dish, please, come. Let's do it.
Where's the tea?
No.
We'll have you back on when he's not
without
here.
tea.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Then we'll
without
talk.
tea.
Oh me, but it's important to me also, this concept of the trans family, that we do include people like Cody, that we do include some of our allies. It's a very specific term, but that's where I think that the difference comes, because when I talk to black trans folks, are like, no, the trans family is this very specific thing because of the cultural aspects that you were talking about, and then other folks are like, no, this is really just for trans people. And then for me, and this is where I go a little bit further, as I think that, you know, we need to have parents that have cis kids, trans parents and cis kids, and also cis kids and their parents. Because the more that we make space for folks like Cody, and the more that we make space for the understanding, that's one less heart that gets turned towards kicking their kids out, or one less uncle or aunts or someone else in that family network. Because a lot of times it's not just losing your parent. Your parents lose the connections if they support you. There's a whole politics to it. So it's all about changing those hearts and minds with that visibility. And if someone like Cody, who shows up and is there for his daughter, says I'm a part of the trans family and shows up and keeps learning, then that's okay with me. But I also know at the same time that some people are like, no, it's a very specific thing. I think we're all full of love and have that opportunity.
Well,
and
I don't think we should limit ourselves at all. I think that, you know, I know so many parents of trans kids and so many trans parents of cis kids, that it's so important that you're right on the they need to be part of the discussion. They need to have a seat at the table and not be excluded because they're not trans. If they have and spouses of trans people, partners of trans people, the same thing. It's important to have a seat at the table and be part of the community. Absolutely.
Because I think that's the ultimate goal, right? Is right now we live in a society, and because of discrimination and racism and just these different ignorances, if you will, we have these different communities. In a way, without all of those things, we would just have the community. And I think in such a way, that's really the ultimate goal, is to find a place where everybody is just part of the community.
Yeah, we don't need any more divisions.
That's right. Yeah.
That's for sure. We need to come together, like you're saying. Absolutely. Probably the biggest harm to this country today is divisiveness and the rhetoric and the disinformation that's causing that within our country. When people, regardless of their political views, can sit down and discuss a topic and agree to disagree, like we've talked about, that's how it should be. That is, but that's not how it is.
No, it's not.
Unfortunately.
I very much live under the philosophy that if what you're doing in your life, what you believe in, if it brings you joy, it fulfills you, it helps you be a positive part of your community, of the world, and doesn't, isn't maliciously hurting people, I support you. I support that. Mm-hmm. And all I ever ask from anybody else is that you do the same for me. And we're allowed for that thing that fulfills us and brings us joy, we're allowed for that to be different. That's part of how we find so many different, amazing, fulfilling things. It's also part of how all the different people are able to find what fills them and brings them joy, is seeing different people do things and bringing that together into themselves. And I think we lose that. We've gotten so focused on hating others for having different faults and challenges than us, or having a different view of what's going to bring them joy, instead of finding joy and love for others for finding joy and love for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Loving your neighbor is a very Christian ethos. It's something that's very simple, but it's also, I think, real important to society holding itself together. But it's not easy. It is not easy. There are a lot of my neighbors I don't necessarily like, but it is a challenge that we have to rise to. And if we don't, we fail that. What happens? We all fall apart.
Well, I think that ethos exists throughout a lot of different belief systems, the loving your neighbor. But I think loving people is a very human ethos.
But you have to carry it a step further. You have to love people the way you love yourself.
Yeah. And the problem is, I think a lot of people just don't love themselves anymore.
I think that's exactly
and it's hard,
right.
And you see that in just the way they act, the bitterness and everything. If you love yourself, you're going to love everything around you, and you won't be bitter. I don't think you won't be hateful. You won't be all those other things that we're seeing happening in the world now, or in our country.
Well, and I think you're right, because you see that a lot, right? Part of my journey just to who I am has been a big part of looking at those things and seeing where I was taught to hate myself, where I learned to hate myself. Because that was a big part of my journey for my children, because I have 3 children, 2 grandchildren. Even long before my daughter ever came out to us, that was part of my journey, was looking at my children and saying, I don't know who they're going to be, but I better make sure that I'm whoever they need. Mm-hmm. And, a big part of that was looking at all those places where and asking myself why. Why does that bother you? And more often than not, I found somewhere, something where somebody or something where I'd learned to hate myself, where I'd learned to suppress something in me. And my reaction to somebody else was based on that. And getting over that, pushing past that, finding those things, facing those fears, right? Because a lot of times that self-hate comes from a fear. Comes from, this is how people are going to treat you. This is who's going to disown you. This is who's not going to love you anymore. And this because this person or these people have been telling you not to be like this or not to do that or not to wear this and don't say this and you shouldn't like that your whole life. They've been telling you to feel bad about yourself and basically threatening you with, if you are like this, they're not going to love you anymore, right? So there's a challenge and fear attached to going, I'm going to do this anyway. I'm going to be me anyway. I'm not going to hate this part of myself. I'm not going to suppress this part of myself. Because as I've said before, I want my children to be themselves fully, because that's how they're going to find joy. That's how they're going to find love for themselves. Can't know yourself if you're not being yourself. You can't love yourself if you don't know yourself. And nobody can love you if you're not being yourself and they're not seeing you. And I want my children to have that. I want them to have love for themselves. I want them to find love other places. And so I know they needed to be themselves to do that. I know they needed to see somebody else be themselves to know what that looked like. That's my responsibility as a father, to make sure that happened. But in that process, I also got to see in other people all these places where they're hating themselves. And to me, that's one of my biggest gifts. Thea wonders how I have so much patience and love, even for people that are hurting me and people that I love. Because I do. I know it's frustrating as heck for Thea. I really do believe in loving everybody, no matter how they feel about me.
It's heartening.
But that's a big part of how I do that, is because of what I went through to get rid of my own self-hate. When I look at other people and I see that hate in them, I know how much it's hurting them. It hurts me, and it hurts us to deal with it. But I look at my life, and I just have to deal with this external hate sometimes. The rest of my life, inside me, nothing but love and joy. Inside my home, nothing but love and joy. And sometimes externally, I have to deal with these people's hate. But those people have to deal with their hate all of the time.
Absolutely. And one of the things that is really important to me about starting the Calos Coalition, even coming up with the idea of Calos, which is the ancient Greek word for beauty, was the idea that this thing that you suppress inside yourself, the things that you're forced to, the things that you hate about yourself, that darkens, in a way, yourself, that darkens not just you, but the community. Because like a light, when you accept yourself and love yourself and you walk in that light, it isn't just something, like you said, carrying the darkness hurts them, but carrying a light helps others. Carrying a light into your community, being your best self, loving yourself, that is something that not only do you need to be there to be a good parent, to be a good friend, that's what you need to have a good community. And I think rather than having debates and questions about what is a woman or what is a man, we should be having discussions about what is a good person? What does it mean to be a good, what is it? And I think at the core of that, starts with, at one level or another, loving yourself. I'm sorry, Miss D, you were going to say something. D, I'm sorry, I'll stop saying Miss D. It's just D.
Well, I think as trans people, one of our challenges I know for me, is that when you're younger, and if younger, like you're being told, oh, be a man, be this, be that, and you have to kind of fill that role, so it's a hard time to get over that internal hate about something you feel was natural to you. It takes a while for a lot of trans people to get over that and then actually get to the point where they're rid of that and say, yeah, I accept myself as I am. I'm a trans person. That's who I am. I'll always be. And that's okay, or that's great.
That's where we have an advantage over the cisgender population. I firmly believe that trans people tend to be stronger than cisgender people emotionally, because of that turmoil we go through. And the younger that someone can transition, the less turmoil that they'll go through. It also takes for someone, and I did not come out until I was in my 40s, late 40s. So it took its toll on me for all those years. So for any of us to love ourselves, it's hard-ass work.
Yes, ma'am.
It's hard work. And most people are lazy.
Yeah. You could say that. I 100% agree with you.
So, the people you're talking about where you see the hate and the self-loathing, it's because they're lazy.
Yeah, most people are motivated only by necessity.
But this should be a necessity. This, as a culture, if we want to do goodness, if we want to see ourselves progress, and we want to see less people in prison, we want to see less people hurting, we want to see less illness, we want to see, then we really, what else is there aside from being good? And I don't know. I'm being overly reductive here a little bit, but I think loving yourself is really powerful.
It's one of the amazing, wonderful things to see about some of the new generation, right, is also kind of the different perspective on even just kind of gender roles and stuff, if you will, in general, which I've really kind of, because as a man, I'm very much in touch that you're a man, you're aggressive, you fight back, you don't cry, you don't show weakness, all of these different things that in a lot of ways I also very much don't attach to. I don't enjoy hurting people. That was one of the hard things to struggle with growing up. As a man, was there's so much in my life instructing me to hurt people, that was the right way to do things, and to constantly feel like I was betraying myself by feeling like hurting people was bad, and to be able to be nurturing, right? That's something that in so many ways I was taught to reject. Oh no, that's mom stuff, right? That's not dad stuff. That's, I had a Cabbage Patch Kid, and but we had to make sure that it was a baseball player Cabbage Patch Kid, and we didn't talk about how I like to change Timothy's diaper, and feed Timothy the bottle. Those were very womanly things, and when I got to a certain age, that wasn't something that was something that you could do when you were younger a little bit, but not when you got older. And so very much throughout my life, this very nurturing part of me, I had to feel bad about that. Now, when I let that go, when I stopped attaching, hey, men don't do that to that, and let myself just be me and just not attach, any of that. This is just who I am, and I'm not going to hate myself for that. I'm going to let myself be this. It changed my whole life.
Oh, absolutely.
It changed everything, every aspect of my life, every aspect. How good a father I was, the kind of husband that I was, down to how clean my home is, and how my laundry gets done, and all of those things. It affected every aspect of my life in an indescribably positive way. And my confidence in myself to go after the things that I wanted, that I knew were important, that didn't exist in the same way before I found that. Yeah, sorry.
No, that's
Went off.
No, don't ever apologize for going off.
How many trans people do we know that before they transitioned, let's talk about trans women to start with, before they transitioned, did hyper-masculine stuff to overcompensate for what they felt was wrong. There's something wrong with me, so I need to be more masculine.
the beard, so to speak. You know, how many trans? There's just a huge, big, oversized beard. I feel like that's a stereotype. I've seen a large percentage of the trans feminine population, because beforehand it was comfort blanket for me personally. It was something that felt like, you know, the more that you go into dive into these things, the safer I was. You know, and I think like there's a combination of that, and it sometimes that blows people's minds. It's because you were wearing a mask this whole time, but it's like, well, do you realize why I had to wear a mask? Do you understand, and I don't think a lot of people have to understand that, but the more understanding we grow the more empathetic and understanding we grow as a society, the more that we have understanding for other types of depression and autism and ADHD, and the more that people are having, I think it's easier for people to relate and understand in their own way, to find some sort of sympathy, but it's a lot. And it's nice to take it off. And once you do take it off, the whole world opens up, because you're not breathing through a mask anymore.
But when you get rid of that disguise, I used to call it disguise. Or I used to call it, I had to dress in drab.
Okay.
As opposed to drag. But after you get past that and you transition, and then you say, but boy, I really enjoyed watching football. Or I really enjoy baking a cake, or whatever, you know, for a trans guy, or what, you know. We have a real dear friend, trans guy, that is a knitter, has knitting circles, and does tremendous, beautiful work. Well, that's something he carried over from pre-transition, and just loves doing it. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just being yourself.
And it's funny, because when you look at a lot of these different things throughout society and history, you can see how certain things actually bounce back and forth all of the time. Knitting. It was very much a cowboy thing. Knitted their own socks.
These are the gender roles that we've kind of been talking about them all night long, actually.
Yeah. And you see how that, you know, all of a sudden at some point it was like, oh, this is a woman's thing. Well, no, this is just something people did to make socks and to make their clothes sometimes. A lot of different people did. You saw the same thing with pink.
Go back. Pink used to be boys and blue for girls, and then they switched, and I can't remember the reason why, but that switched at some point, early 1900s or something. That was when it started switching. And then too, when you had way back that boys always had dresses on when they were growing up.
Yeah.
Part of it was because it was easier to change diapers that way.
Yeah, Winston Churchill, you know, manly man. You know, got pictures of him as a baby wearing that was a pink little dress, because that was what it was there at the turn of century. So I think those things are always funny to examine, and they also let us learn more about ourselves. Because think about the folks who have wanted to knit, who've wanted to do things. A lot of these people who've wanted to go into, and they just haven't because of these roles. That is the darkness that we're talking. That is the light that we want to see come out in people. That's when we talk about being your best self and showing up. Why have you denied yourself something as simple as a dress? A dress doesn't have anything to do with gender. It doesn't have anything to do with sex. It has to do with how you feel in the dress. And Perceptions. Oh, what will the neighbors think?
Well, and to me, it's so interesting to hear people clamor about freedom, but still insist upon imprisoning themselves.
Well, they do it to themselves, yeah. Right. They absolutely do. Again, it goes back to laziness, because they're afraid to break the bars down.
Yeah, it's why I love ADHD people, is because I've found that it's not that I found, it's supported psychologically, that when somebody's content, most people, normal people, if you will.
Who?
Yeah, exactly. But when the majority of people are content, there's no motivation for them to do anything. They have food, safety, housing. It's working. You do, but it's already been working. You just keep doing that same thing over and over again because you found that it works. That's the animal mind at work. ADHD people, we, for some reason, will be like, this is boring. Let's just go do something else anyway. And that's, I think it's a superpower, even though they call it a disability. I think it's my biggest superpowers.
I think also about people that, like, they complain about cancel culture. and they say they love freedom and free speech and all this sort of stuff, and then they want to pass laws that make it illegal for trans people to be in public. Like, we were talking about cancel culture. Huh?
Well,
excuse me? Who
and
are
a
you
lot-
canceling? And also, we're not using the state of 9 times out of 10. We're talking about like, oh, you lost your job because you're a celebrity and you said some super racist or sexist or homophobic thing. Oh, that's not us. That's not. These people are using the state and then still want to go whine about cancel culture. It's talk about laziness intellectually. That's just, you're not even trying. You're just being hateful. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get off on a
No, you're absolutely right. Like the whole idea that freedom means being able to do something without consequence. No, you were still free to say that. Just everybody treated you like the asshole that you were for doing it. That's
Yeah.
You can be free just as long as you don't do something I don't like. That's kind of what the attitude is of people.
Yeah.
You can be free, just don't do something I don't like. You can be free to do whatever you want. But if I don't like it, I'm going to try to find a way to make it so you have to stop that.
So do we want to head into the news?
We probably should head into the news a little bit here. We've got a couple different things that have been on the agenda. Let's see.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I didn't know if I would sweep things.
Oh no,
No.
you're fine. Absolutely. Let's go ahead. Can we? Let's take a break real quick, Paul.
Gotcha.
All right, and we're back. We are going to go ahead and skip over our news segment for this evening because honestly, there's too much news to talk about going on in the world, and this conversation has been amazing tonight. Thank you so much for being here, Miss D. And I said Miss D again, I can't help it. It's nothing but respect, I promise. D, thank you for being here, and thank you, Tracy, for being here as well.
You're welcome.
Is there anything that y'all would like to tell us about coming up or anything like that before we send you off?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for inviting me to speak, and I can't speak for my friend here, Tracy, but I want to thank you for, well, I'll speak for Tracy and thank you for inviting us to be here tonight, and it's been a lot of fun and great conversation, so I think you've covered quite a few of the things that are happening. Remember that Pride Month is right around the corner in June. So all kinds of events will be happening there from in Hampton Roads. There will be Pride in the Peak, which is Chesapeake's Pride, and Hampton Roads Pride Fest on the 22nd, I think it is, of June, or the 23rd of June. And then there is Portsmouth Pride on June 1st, and all three events are pretty fantastic events.
Yeah, no, I always look forward to Pride. I remember my very first Pride with one of my really good friends. It was 20-something years ago now, out in Long Beach. And I just remember, a little bit nervous because I'd never really been to a Pride event before. And that was why my friend was bringing me, is he was gay, but he'd never been to one before. And he'd asked me if I would go with him. He was like, hey, I've never been to one before. I don't know. I don't want to go by myself. Will you come with me? And I was like, well, yeah, you're my friend. I'm going to always, have your back. And I remember leaving there thinking, how is a big event just with all of that music and fun and beauty been happening, and I had no idea the whole time. And I've gone to some sort of Pride event ever since. And it was just great because when my children came out, I was like, I was ready. I got it on my calendar already. Let's go.
Well, and the thing is about Pride events, it's a lot like our T-Dove and T-Door events in that there's that energy of family, what we've been talking about all night long, about that at Hampton Roads Pride Fest, there might be 20,000 people at Town Point Park in Norfolk, and all having fun, and it's the energy and the synergy involved, and just the excitement of being able to be who we are, living our authentic lives.
And that's a big part of it. I will admit there's a feeling, even for me as a cishet, white man, there's a feeling when you're at Pride of just, all these other places in life, you're wondering if people are accepting you or judging you. And Pride is one of the only places I have found where that doesn't exist. I walk around without that existing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I didn't come out until I was 30 years old, so I've only been out, almost 4 years at this point now. And when the first year after I did come out publicly, I went to Pride, and I had the same experience. It was like, why had I not been going to these events for all this time? And it just speaks to another topic we've been talking about is the hurt and the pain and the darkness, and how we cut ourselves off from joy and from growth when we aren't who we are, we don't accept who we are. But then it's also a good story because the first time I went with Taylor, who is actually, you know,
my cousin,
literal trans family here, a member over here. So I actually was very good friends with his cousin before we actually got a chance to meet. And it's just, it's like I said, it's always a family affair at the trans family dinner because we have so many people coming out. And that feeling of togetherness, that's what it's all about. And I don't think that that's a foreign feeling to most cis folks. I don't think that's something that they're alien. Like when you look into the face of a child and you see that light coming out, you see a mother glowing, when you see someone just working in their purpose and doing what they're supposed to do, and it's just beautiful. That's something I think we all need to be focusing on. And I'm grateful that we have a chance to celebrate that at Pride.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much. And one last thing I will ask before we go. How can we support TAP? If to our listeners and everything like that, how can they support your work, and how can we help bring resources to your programs?
I think the best way is to pay it forward to other people. Help bring joy to other people and offer them the resources. Offering someone a helping hand or a leg up, but people have to be willing to help themselves at the same time. So helping people help themselves is the way you can help support us and continue being present in the community and being visible and living your authentic lives and supporting your trans kids, your gender non-conforming kids, your non-binary kids, and get to know a trans person. Have a conversation. If you're cisgender, have a conversation with a trans person. If you're a trans person, if the chance presents itself and you feel safe in doing so, have a conversation with a cisgender person. You may make a friend. You never know.
That's wonderful. You heard right here. That's the best way to support TAP, is to continue to be that light in your life, in your life and in your family. So thank you again for watching, and
be part of the love. And in the tradition, an example that Dee and Tracey have been setting for more than 2 decades now, trans love will beat hate every time.
That's right. And we're clear.
Although
It's a take.
That's a take.
I said love instead of joy, but love.
Hey, you know what? We can just every single time we'll do a little bit of change. What is it? We started with love. What is it? Trans joy defeats hate. Then trans joy beats hate. Then trans love defeats. Well,
as long as we stay on the same tune.
As long as
all
we're winning.
about love and joy defeating hate. That is the moral of the story.
This podcast is brought to you in partnership with Collective Tattoo and the Calos Coalition. We are listener supported, so if you like the show, please consider donating to us on Patreon at patreon.com/talkingtransparency. Like, share, and subscribe across social media, and be sure to visit our Linktree at linktree.com/talkingtrans.